Year 7, Year 8. Today it's flapjack, or this week it's flapjack. So to do this recipe we're going to get ourselves ready to cook. So I've washed my hands already with some soap. I've tied my hair back if it's touching my shoulders. I've put an apron on, and I'm also going to spray down the surfaces. As we've said before, make sure that you ask your parents how and what they'd like to use to wipe down your surfaces, and make sure you do that before you start cooking. Now, there's a few jobs you need to do today. We're going to be using the hob, or if your parents or carers prefer, the microwave, and we're going to also be using the main oven today. So, first things first, can you make sure that your parents or carers are, one, happy for you to cook, and two, that they are in and able to supervise you whilst you cook. So, first jobs first, we're going to preheat our oven, and you're going to need to turn it on to either 180 degrees fan or 200 degrees if it's not a fan electric oven, and about gas mark 4. So I'm just going to preheat my oven. You need to check with your parent or carer how your oven works, and it would probably be sensible for you to ask them to do that for you. You're going to get yourself next a tin that the flapjacks are going to be put into. Now I've got here a sandwich tin, a Victoria sandwich tin, that is 18 centimetres or 7 inches in diameter. I'm going to place that onto a baking sheet like this, because this, when I'm wearing my oven gloves later, is easier to put into the oven than quite a small tin. It's also, most importantly, easier to take out of the oven a baking tray, because it's got these nice handles here that I'll be able to hold wearing my oven gloves. Now, to your 7-inch, 18 centimetre Victoria sandwich tin, you need to line it. Now, it might be that you use some greaseproof paper to do this. You cut a circle out the same diameter as the base. You could draw around the outside of the tin onto the paper and then cut that out. You then would put a little bit of oil down, a little bit of oil around the edges, cut around the edges a piece of greaseproof paper that is just wide enough to go around the edges, and then you'd stick the paper onto the oiled tin. However, if you've got these at home, and I have to say I use these quite a lot, they're like a cake liner, and it's made of greaseproof paper type material. I can place that in, then I'll be putting my flapjack in there, and it means that when it's finished and when it's cooled down and when it's ready to eat much later on, I will be able to take this out, and it saves me worrying about cutting greaseproof paper to the right size. So that is why I'm using one of these, but it might be you need some greaseproof paper. Please do use paper, because you'll find your flapjack might stick otherwise. Once you've got your tin lined, you're then going to get your scales. And I'm going to get a small bowl as well as a large bowl. Okay. Now my small bowl is going to help me to weigh and measure things, which I will then put into my large bowl. There's two types of ingredients here that we're going to use. We're going to use some ingredients that are glue that hold the flapjack together, and the second lot of ingredients are kind of more dry ingredients. They're the oats and the fruit. I'm going to start off then getting the oats and fruit ready. The oats and fruit are going to go into your large bowl. So I'm going to put my bowl on the scales that I'm measuring with and turn the scales on. I need to remember that they should be at 0 grams or 0 G once the bowl is on top. Otherwise I need to take the bowl off, switch them off, put the bowl back on, and then switch them on. Quantities then. I need 175 grams of oats. The oats I'm using here are porridge oats. The cheaper the better, funnily enough, with this recipe. If you've got sachets of things like Oats So Simple, they don't work, and I ask that you don't use those in this recipe. And I'm looking for 175 grams. And if you're a few grams over, up to about 10, it's okay. If you go more than about 10 grams over, it's not good. You need to take some out and put them back into the bag. So my oats, 178 grams, so it's within that 10 grams of tolerance. They're going to go into my large bowl. Now the next thing I'm going to put into this bowl, I put it back on and it should go back to 0 now. is some fruit. You need 75 grams of fruit in total. It could be fresh fruit, for example a banana or an apple, or some strawberries that you wash and chop up, or it could be some tinned fruit, only 75 grams mind you, or it could be some dried fruit. Today I've got some dried fruit and I've got some dried cranberries, and because I don't think I've quite got enough dried cranberries, I'm going to mix it with a few apricots. In total I want 75 grams of fruit, whether it's dried, fresh or tinned. So 75 grams, again they go in, and that's at 56 grams. So I'm going to take some of my apricots and add these till I get to 75. There we go. Because apricots are quite large, it's gone up to 79 degrees and that's okay. If you're using dried fruit or fresh fruit or tinned fruit, you might need to get a chopping board out here and then using a bridge and claw grip, peel and chop any of your fruit as necessary. With the dried fruit, the apricots just need to be cut into quarters. So I'm going to take a pair of scissors that I use only for food, I'm going to cut them in half, and then cut that half into half again so that they end up in quarters, and they go into the bowl with the oats. Things like raisins, sultanas work brilliant in this recipe, and anything that's about that size you don't need to chop up. So my dried cranberries, which are about the same size as raisins, they just go straight into the bowl. You can then just take a spoon and stir the oats and the fruit around, and then leave it to one side. The next little job for you is to get a saucepan, because you're going to be using the hob. You're going to do the melting method where you melt the butter or margarine and it becomes liquid, and along with the golden syrup and the sugar it will be the glue that holds the oats together when you finally get your flapjack. If I put the saucepan on top of the scales now, it says it's 155 grams. That is of course wrong. I need to turn my scales off, and if you're not sure how to do that, please ask a parent or carer. Put the saucepan on top and switch it on. First thing I'm going to add to this is some sugar. You can use either brown sugar or caster sugar or demerara sugar even, it won't matter for this. However, you need to have 50 grams of sugar, and I'm pouring this directly into my saucepan. There we go, 50 grams. I've chosen brown sugar, it will give it a slightly darker colour when it comes out of the oven. The next thing you need to add is 100 grams of butter or block margarine, the hard margarine that comes in a packet like this, but it's margarine rather than butter. So because at the moment my scales say that I'm on 50 grams, I need to turn them off and then turn them back on, and they will go to 0 grams again. I'm then going to add in 100 grams of butter. I don't think this is too far off this first block, so let's add that in. A little bit more. Let's see where that takes us to. Nearly. And that's the 105. So again, within that 10 grams of tolerance, I'm happy with that. The last thing that I'm going to add is my golden syrup. I'm going to make a suggestion that you take your scales away at this stage, because they will get sticky. And you need a tablespoon. A tablespoon is probably, you may or may not have in your armoury at home. So you've got a teaspoon which you'd use to stir your tea or coffee, you've got a dessert spoon that you'd eat your dessert with after dinner, and a tablespoon is bigger than that. If you've got measuring spoons, you need to find one that is a tablespoon or 15 millilitres. You're going to need 2 tablespoons of golden syrup, and I'm going to suggest you also have a teaspoon on standby, and you'll see why in a moment. If you've got a tin of syrup, this is fine too. This just happens to be what's in my cupboard. So I take my first good tablespoon of syrup and add that into my saucepan. I then take the second spoonful, and because some of the syrup is stuck in there from the first tablespoon, it's quite a generous tablespoon. And I'm then going to use my teaspoon to just get all of that sticky syrup in. Don't be tempted to up the quantity of syrup. You literally need this amount and no more. I'm going to put those straight into my washing up bowl because they're very sticky. I then need you to get yourself a spoon that is heat proof, i.e. you can use the spoon to stir things that are on the hob, and you're going to take your saucepan over to the hob. We're going to do the melting method, and all that literally means is we're going to gently, on a low heat, melt the butter or margarine. The sugar will still be grainy, you'll still hear that. The syrup will stay pretty much the same, but it will become a liquid that is melted. So I'm coming over to the hob, and I'm going to choose a ring. I'm going to go for a medium ring here. And then I'm going to ask you to ask your parent or carer to watch you at this point and to help you to turn your ring on. If you are on electric, you need a medium heat, so you'll need it, if you've got a choice of 1 to 6, you want it on about a 3 or 4. If you're on gas, you want it on quite a small flame. You then carefully, because we are aware that the heat is coming from the base here of our hob, we gently melt the butter. We are turning it around slightly and gently, but we are not being particularly rough with this, because if we do, the hot sugar, the hot syrup and the hot butter will spatter, and that will mean that we could get burnt. So you need to be aware that you need to stir this gently. Now while this is heating, I'm holding onto the handle carefully, but I know that all of the bits around the outside of the saucepan are getting hot. So you need to make sure that you do not touch those bits. Even when it comes off the heat, they will retain their heat and they will still be hot. So this is slowly melting the butter. I don't want it to bubble. And you can see at the moment there's a bit of a layer of yellow forming on the top of mine. That is simply the butter melting and the fat rising to the top. It is nothing to worry about. Now there are a few bubbles appearing, and I don't want the bubbles to be there. I don't want this fat to boil. So I'm going to turn this down just a little bit and let the remainder of the heat on the hob melt the butter. And I'm now going to turn the heat off. So as soon as that butter's melted, or as nearly melted as that is, where there's just a couple of tiny little lumps in there, then I'm turning that heat off. If you've got an electric hob, that hob will stay hot for a very long time. If you've got a gas hob, this will stay hot for a very long time, and all the metallic bits around the hob here will stay hot. So please be aware, and please do not put anything on this hob, and do not touch this hob even when it's switched off. I'm then going to take a heat-proof mat and put it back over to show you the rest of this demonstration. I take my hot liquid. Now please be careful at this stage. Sugar can get to about 200 degrees plus, whereas water boils at 100, so this mixture now is very hot. You very carefully tip everything in the saucepan into your oats and your fruit mix. Try and get as much of the mixture out, because you want your flapjack to stick together, and this is the edible glue that will stick this together. I'm then going to take my spoon that I used to stir the saucepan, and I'm going to stir the oats, and I'm looking for every single oat to go a nice golden brown colour. So at the moment I can still see that there's white oats in there, they haven't been coated. So I'm going to coat all of those. And then, when that's done, I'm going to take my container that this is going to go in, my tin that I've lined, and I'm going to put all of the oaty mix into my tin. At this stage you might think this doesn't look right, there looks like there's a mountain of oats, and it does at the moment. But trust me, it will look all right in a minute. Using then a spoon, it can be any type of spoon, like a teaspoon is fine, or a dessert spoon. You're going to press this flapjack into the tin, and we're going to use the back of the spoon to press that down. I go all the way around. I'm just trying to open this up so that you can see what I'm doing. I press it down all the way around, particularly the edges. And this helps to stick your flapjack together when it comes out the oven and when it cools down. So the science behind this is that the butter is now liquid. It's going to cook, and then it will go back to solid again and hold everything in place, as will the sugar. There we go. And I've pressed all the way down into those edges. I've pressed the middle as well, and it looks like it's shrunk quite a bit. I'm going to get those last few oats off. There we go. That's then going to go onto my baking sheet here. And then at this point it's going to go into the oven for between 15 and 20 minutes until just around the edges starts to go a little bit brown. We don't want it golden brown all over and starting to burn. We want it just about golden brown around the edges. So I'm going to put my oven gloves on. And at this stage, please do ask your parents and carers to either do this for you, or at the very least they need to be supervising you doing this. You're going to securely, in your oven gloves, hold the baking tray. And if you're doing this bit yourself, then you'll need to ask your parent or carer to open the oven door for you. And then with 2 hands, count to 3 to let some of that hot air escape from the oven. And your flapjack goes in. You then need to set your timer for 15 to 20 minutes and hopefully take a little look then. I'll show you what to do when they come out, but while you're waiting for them to come out of the oven, you need to get washed up and dried up, and you need a cooling rack or a heat-proof pan stand to get ready to put this on. You'll also need a knife that you use to butter your bread, because you're going to mark your flapjack out when they come out. I'll rejoin you in a minute. So my flapjacks have had just about 20 minutes now. They are starting to look golden brown around the outside of the flapjack, so I know that they're done. I put my oven gloves on, and I asked somebody else to hold open that oven door for me while I carefully took these out wearing oven gloves, and I placed them onto a heat-proof mat there so that they won't burn, the hot tray won't burn the surface. Now it's come out of the oven, and these will be very, very hot for a very long time. Please do not be tempted to touch the flapjack at this stage. The sugar, as I said earlier, can get up to about 200 degrees, hotter than boiling water. It will burn, but it also will stick to you, and so it will carry on burning. So please, please don't be tempted to touch the actual flapjack. Now it's very easy to think, I want to slice this immediately, and you need to be patient with flapjack. You need to give that butter time to firm up again, and for everything to solidify, so that when you take out a slice, it will be a slice and not just a crumbly granola. So this has just come out of the oven a couple of moments ago. I'm going to take a knife that I used to butter my bread, and I'm not going to try and get any slices out of this, but I'm going to mark the flapjack into 8 pieces. To mark the flapjack, I am just lightly scoring it on the top with the knife. I'm not pushing right down to the bottom, I'm just scoring it. So I've done it in half one way, in half the other way, and I'm using my oven gloves with one hand in them to hold this tray steady. I then see where I've cut it into quarters. Halfway in that quarter, I'm going to do another cut that way, and I'm going to carry on that cut down there. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 small slices and 2 large slices left. And I'm then going to cut the 2 large quarters into 8s like this. Now, they are not cut down to the very bottom of the flapjack. They literally have just had the knife run along, but you'll find that by marking the flapjack like this, you'll get a slice out easier later. So, now, this is the difficult bit, because you need to resist temptation. You need to leave these to cool down. You can even put them into the fridge to firm up once they're cool enough. But you're probably going to need to leave them about 4 hours until you can have a slice. But when you do have a slice, I hope you manage to enjoy them. Thank you ever so much.